Okay, hello everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the Conscious Creative Culture Podcast, a series dedicated to expanding the culture narrative on artworks of all forms to heal and expand our humanity. In our first season, we are interviewing creatives and public health advocates working on fascinating projects at the intersection of arts and culture and public health. We are asking the questions: why art? Why collaborate? How can we collaborate? And why now? The Conscious Creative Culture Podcast is a production of Taboo Health, a platform, a community, and an art consultancy, creating a movement for collaboration between public health and art. Since 2017, our mission has been to use art and culture as a means of educating, increasing accessibility, and fostering discussions regarding all aspects of human health and well-being at a collective level, or as we like to say, to make healing trend. I'm your host, Maria, and today I'm co-hosting with Chelsi, a spoken word poet, and Rio, a medical anthropology specialist with a background in theater and drama. Today, with our first guest, Dr. David Neilipovitz. Welcome. All right. So a bit about Dave. He is the head of the Department of Critical Care at the Ottawa Hospital, professor at the University of Ottawa, and a critical care lead for the Champlain sub-region. On top of all that, Dr. David Neilipovitz is also currently working on a docu-series on death and dying, which examines the traumatic, burdensome, and sometimes unempathetic process of death and dying in Canada, while considering the impact of technology and cultural diversity. The docu-series aims to foster a better understanding of death and dying process, to explore possible alternative narratives to the existing paradigm of dying in Canada, and to create a call to action to create a more compassionate and dignified dying journey. Dave, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We are so excited to have a chance to learn more about your journey, your past projects, and your present projects.
Glad to be here, Maria. Just a
So
small correction. I'm past head, so I'm now in my early retirement from that position. So hopefully,
gotcha.
working on some new projects, and that's what I'm
Oh,
happy to be
okay.
speaking with you today.
Oh, amazing. Well, good luck with that.
Wow. And so, Dave, before we dive into your current work on the Death and Dying docuseries and all of your upcoming projects, we wanted to understand a bit more about why better end of life care matters to you. So, for our listeners who may or may not know, can you describe what anesthesiology is and critical care?
Yeah, good question. So I have two specialties. One is anesthesia, and I think most people are aware of the anesthesiologist being the doctor you speak very briefly to, and they have you go to sleep and hopefully keep you well while you're asleep, and you wake up and they ask you to open your eyes and bring you to the recovery room, and you feel like you never met them, but you spent a lot of time with them. So that's anesthesia. I think that's pretty you know more open for what the public is aware of. The other specialty, and that's probably where I'll be more the focus today, is on critical care. And so critical care, for the most part, we work in what's called an intensive care unit, and that's where the sickest of the sick go in the hospital. So that's where people go on breathing machines, on medications to make the heart work better. And so that, just by the nature of being the sickest of the sick, is where, unfortunately, patients who are very ill, and the majority that pass away in a hospital will often spend some time or pass away in an intensive care unit. So that's where I spend most of my time.
Okay, that thank you. That's a really good description, and I think that encompasses how your specialty relates to end of life care. And in your opinion, based on your experiences, what is good end of life care? Which is probably a loaded question.
Yeah, it's very subjective too. There's so much that goes into death and dying, and don't forget that perhaps I could be a little bit biased in that I see the ones that are much more dramatic, where someone's coming into a hospital and passing away in an intensive care unit. The nature of it, what is it? what is a process, the dying process, that for all intents and purposes is good, and again, that's very subjective. And um, what one doesn't want to see is someone in pain or discomfort. What one doesn't want to see is someone not being able to communicate with those they know and love. And that's unfortunately often what I see in the intensive care unit, that someone has a
Okay.
breathing tube in, which makes it much harder for them to talk to their family and friends. It's
Mm.
also just by the nature of going through a dramatic death, where people are trying to change something that may or may not be reversible. And that's the concern. You know, what is a good death? I struggle with that because I don't think we all have the answer, but I think it's being surrounded by friends and family, and that even includes the family pets,
No.
which is not very common to be able to do in a hospital. To be with those you know and love, and to have your pain controlled in a reasonable fashion, but be able to communicate up until when to near the end. I think that is something that for me is what I would prefer that most people would experience at the time of their demise. And so that's part of the hope is that that could be more common as opposed to being the exception.
Right. I think that's a great answer, and that makes a lot of sense, making it sort of on more on these individuals' own terms and as comforting. And obviously with death, tricky to say, out of someone's control or in their control, but I guess making it as on their own terms as possible the given the situation.
And can I ask, even actually on that point? Oh, yeah. I think, I mean, how is the system right now not conducive to that as the majority?
There
Mm.
there is almost a denial at times of death, that death is going to happen. One of the lines that I'm sure you've heard me say at times in the past is, just because we could doesn't mean we should. And, I could put someone on a breathing machine. I could try to restart someone's heart. There comes a time, though, when we realize that it's not going to change the inevitable outcome of them passing away. It may delay it, um, but at what cost? And I say cost. I don't just mean like financial. Let's ignore money. Uh, you know, truly, there's an emotional cost. There is a cost of pain and discomfort to an individual, and that those are real. And delaying what is likely going to happen, but preventing someone to be able to communicate and have closure with friends and family, to 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 have that, is something that many of us who work in critical care are quite concerned that we're at times doing stuff that we recognize won't make a difference, and that it's coming at those costs: emotional, physical, some financial, but there are untoward effects of what we're doing.
That must be, I mean, just hearing that, and obviously I know you from outside of this project, but I can hear that that would have an impact on care providers, as well as family, perhaps, um, and um, and just there could be a ripple effect from that.
There's a huge cost, like an emotional cost. There's care fatigue. Um, they'll talk about moral distress, that health professionals, and be it nurses, physicians, respiratory therapy, all those involved, they recognize the the downside of what they're actually doing. And there's times that we all experience, and you'll never get rid of it all. And as I've said at times at work is, if you never try, you'll never succeed. However, there's circumstances that are pretty clear that what's going to happen, and so it's how can we change it? How can we make it better? And that's been the goal of
That makes sense when you talk about your position in critical care and how that sort of makes you qualified to tackle this issue. It sounds like you work so closely with these people who are in these states and these accidents that I think the perspective you're able to offer is a very sort of intimate one because you're right with those people as the events occurring, it sounds like. In your opinion, how would you say that better end of life care in Canada is a public health issue and not just a healthcare system issue?
well, when we look at it, it is a huge public health care issue in that, you know, there's, as I said, there's an emotional cost, there's a time cost, there's physical cost of what we're doing. There is a financial cost of what we're doing. And I worry we're impairing what we can do for others. And more importantly, I feel like we're letting down the individuals who 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 are dying. Like there's almost a denial of time at times that death will happen. It's easier for me to tell you what options of treatment I could potentially offer you, as opposed to sit down and say the difficult discussion of, I'm sorry, it almost doesn't matter what we offer, it will only delay what's going to happen. And how can we respect what you hope and would like? I don't think people want to die per se. That there's times where they would want the pain and suffering to end, and things as such. But again, if it's not something that we can reasonably achieve,
Mhm.
what can we do different? And quite frankly, we could create different types of resources for the individuals to do this, as well as I think you recognize, and certainly with what's gone on with the pandemic, our system is stressed, and that we could do better. And I always hate bringing up costs, like financial costs, because what is the cost of life? No one can
Mhm.
put a value on it. It's we're losing an opportunity for an individual to have what most people, I think, would say that sounds like a way to spend time with family, and have closure. I worry we prevent closure. Worry about the anguish that families go through as they see their loved one, you know, potentially have pain and suffering, but also not being able to communicate with them. That has a lasting effect. I'm not an expert in that, but I have little doubt that there's many who could talk about what they went through when a parent, a friend, a spouse, even a child went through. So there is lasting effects that I do think we could help mitigate, help minimize that. We'll never prevent it, but hopefully make it better.
And I think so. You're talking about these people's experiences, and of course, death happens to every one of us. Like you said, it's not preventable, the death itself, but why do you think it's an important thing to tell these stories and to tell these people's stories? Um, why do you think?
Why is it important? I think there's almost there's two things that, when you say that, why is it important to use stories, and I'll touch on that if there's time. But I think it's important because not everyone experiences seeing someone pass away. Okay, so or it happens later on in one's life, um, and sometimes it's medicalizing death is really what we've done, and so if someone's not experienced it directly, they're not necessarily aware of what's going on or what it will be like. Far too often what we base our experience on is what we see on TV, where someone's there and, and they talk to wherever and then they die. And there's no breathing tubes, there's no chest compressions, there's no drama, there's no, it's a very sanitized, um, what often happens on TV. And I'm not saying that's never how it happens, but that's really not how it happens, right? And so there's tubes in place, beeps and buzzers. People aren't communicating. It's cold, to be quite frank. It's not. And the idea of telling stories, how do you get people to relate? How do you communicate? And I think communicating events or issues, it's a lot easier to communicate with stories. People can, if they look at it and go, wow, I can, that would be like if it was my dad, or that could be my mother, or my, like, to the ability to relate to what is going on is so important. And that's why stories, look, that's what our people have done for millennia, to pass on things. It's always a story, and so that's what's powerful. That's what people remember, as opposed to a fax or some kind of statement. People remember stories.
So powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. That's, I know it's hard to imagine because like you said, not all of us have. I don't think I've been in the hospital. I haven't been in the hospital and witnessing that, and talking about your death and dying docu series. The idea of bringing light to that and showing the public what it actually looks like and hearing these real stories. I could imagine that, like you said, many of us haven't, and it would be just like kind of a unifying thing to hear these shared experiences. And what do you think in terms of choosing to make the docuseries in a film format? What was around your decision to choose film and to choose that medium to present these stories?
That it didn't come to that overnight. So that's the background of it. So being a physician, we often have a scientific background, and you'll often hear people talk about what's the evidence and things, and oh, you need to educate people. And so in the past, I've done education and courses and things, and that helps, but it doesn't hit the big audience, right? And education is only impactful if someone wants to be educated. So that's one of the limitations of it. So the idea is in my life, what have I, where have I changed opinions? Where have I, you know, garnered new insights and be it enlightenment or be educated in a fashion that I didn't realize I was being educated and enlightened. And for me personally, things that really, if I can relate to, is often imagery. And so to see it is often so much more powerful than just to read about it. At least for me, I'm a very visual individual. And so the idea was, what kind of visual media could could be used to change the way people perceive things. You know, again, if you ask healthcare professionals, we recognize there's a problem. You ask the public, I'm not sure they fully appreciate what's going on and how it could be better. I think there's a perception that science can prevent and deal with so many problems. And there's not an appreciation of what it's like when unfortunately you're at one's end. And so the idea is how can we change that perception? how can we enlighten individuals and really have a paradigm shift in how the public and way Canadians deal with this. And so, how can you do that? And you know, you know, music is certainly powerful, but everyone has a different kind of what kind of song or music that they like. So it would be very limited. Print is powerful, but
Right.
I think more and more we've come to a stage where people are basing everything on Twitter feeds. So I don't even know how many characters are in a tweet. So I'm going to embarrass myself in that regards because obviously I'm older than all of you. But again, people won't read, and so but people will watch, and imagery I think is it for me at least, and maybe I'm projecting, and I'm sure I am, but is so powerful, and storytelling is a way for people to relate in and be taken in and listen. Okay. And so it's putting the two together, storytelling
I
with
love
imagery.
that.
Well, that's, yeah, that's, thank you. Thank you for sharing all of that. And that absolutely makes sense. And I think the idea of a docu series, especially versus just not, I shouldn't say just, but as opposed to a film, I think that's a really interesting concept because it allows you the opportunity to have different episodes. And I know that's something that you've given a bit of thought into. Are you hoping to discuss different themes with those different episodes in the docu series?
Yeah, no, and we've struggled. Like, how can we communicate the situation and the idea with a single film, there has to be a tying story that goes through from start to the middle to the finish. And with a series, there has to be that, but there's a little bit more opportunity on each episode to explore a different topic, and again with an underlying theme that brings them all together. So the idea is the death and dying, what's going on, what are different issues related to death and dying, and bring it all together. Whereas in a film, you would try to achieve the same, however, it would be a little more fragmented and less opportunity to truly explore each topic to its fullest.
Could you elaborate a little bit on some of those different topics that you hope to address in the docuseries?
So there are several topics that we would hope to explore, and obviously you could never do it justice, without doing an astronomical number of episodes. But the idea would be is let's present the problem, you know, let's enlighten and almost bring a camera in to what's going on now, particularly in the hospital setting. So the idea is to bring about why this is an issue. Okay, why should why should the viewer care? You know, and I that's what I would hope to begin with is what is the present situation. The idea as well is where I've often stressed up, just because you could doesn't mean you should. And that's a hard one sometimes for someone to reconcile. It's you mean you could prolong, you know, mom's life if you put a breathing tube in, and why wouldn't you do that? It is something that, on face value can be hard to fully appreciate. Now, if I told you, well, I could put mom's breathing tube in, but she would still pass away in a week, she would have pain and discomfort, and you wouldn't be able to talk with her, and she wouldn't be able to talk with you. So that we're preventing that. So it's this idea of the idea of why one wouldn't do something, but do something instead that may shorten how long they're living, but improve the quality of the time that they have left, and also provide an opportunity to talk to those that mom knows and loves, and with it. So again, that is certainly one of the idea. The hope would also be to look at what goes on in other situations. Um, what other forms of people passing away, people dying in Canada exist. What is it like in hospice care? What does palliative care actually mean to individuals? What is there an opportunity that can happen? And also look at sometimes the idea of unexpected death. You know, like there are consequences of it to the family and friends. There's always going to be accidents, and so death at some point will always be unexpected. But the reason why I felt that might be important to look at is the impact of not preparing in some fashion. How does it impact your family? How does it impact your friends, your children, and things as such? So there is consequences to that. The idea would also be, Canada is only one place in the world, and maybe other places do it better. And when we talk about that, I think everyone always focuses on the United States. That's the downside of being so close. I don't think the Americans do it better. In fact, they may actually do it worse. But the idea is there are other countries in the world, there are other ways of doing things. And the idea at the end would be how do we bring this all together? How can we work together and make things better? And what are some possibilities? What are some ways that we could potentially make a difference and make changes that would benefit many more than what we're doing presently?
That's to your point of mentioning other countries and Canada and the States. Are there any practices that stood out to you in other countries around the world or other cultures that are something that Canada might benefit from taking on?
I'm sure there is. I'm not going to profess to being the world expert. I think I'm more familiar with the American by proximity as opposed to anything. But certainly, what goes on in the United Kingdom is a little bit different. Switzerland has a lot of different approaches to it, whereby a lot of these countries focus on physician assisted death. That's not what I'm advocating for. I mean, but they do explore that aspects of it. There is a lot more of hospice care in other countries. So again, the idea would be, hey, I'm on this journey to learn as well. And that's the idea of it is I'm not coming in saying Dave's got the answers. You know, Dave's asking questions. You know, I think those who know me know that I have a bad habit of saying the emperor doesn't have any clothes on. I'll point out the problems, and maybe that's one of my faults. But one of the things I'm hoping is to work and find better solutions, because I can tell you the existing ain't working. You know, I have some ideas on how to make it better. Others have ideas on how to make it better, but I think we all need to want to make it better. And that's the goal. The goal of doing this isn't so much to come up with here's the perfect answer. It's here's the better questions to be asking. Here's what's not working. Let's work together. Let's try to make changes. Let's do better.
I'm really hearing um, kind of like what Ria was saying earlier as well, that telling these stories can help to unify all of us who might be feeling some level of unpreparedness, or maybe even having had a bad experience with end of life. Um, I could even hear telling these stories could give closure, could give um, healing, better understanding, hope for someone else not to have to go through maybe a bad experience like someone might have had around end of life, and unifying these voices, those who've been affected or those who are concerned about this, could then come together and actually, like you said, ask these questions and give us the permission to ask these questions is also what I'm hearing from this, from telling these stories and from putting this out there. I think that's actually really powerful because what is it? There's a quote that I can't remember who said it, so it's left me right now. But change is always started with a small group of people. Um, so that's what I'm really hearing in this. It's collecting those people, which
Yeah.
is so powerful in and of itself.
The voice of the many is hard to ignore. You can, and look, changes happen. And I know a lot of people don't think changes do happen and would happen, but it does.
Beautiful. Commend you. We will get to more of your venture very soon, from Chelsi, as she's going to explore more the creative endeavor and the creative process very shortly. But I commend you for tackling this not only just from the traditional healthcare side, but now through a new medium and through a different channel, for the same purpose at the end of the day. But being willing to actually go out of.
Let's hope it happens, Maria. That's the hope. You know, you know. I'm as you know, I'm a doctor. I'm not. Maybe I do tell stories, but you know, it's venturing out, and it's not just me. It's going to be, you know, those with me. If we can make it happen.
I know. I think before we, because I know there's a lot that we want to look at the artistic side. On that last note that you mentioned about this being a new medium and sort of something new that you're venturing into, is there anything that you're immediately nervous about taking on? Because as you said, I know you're a doctor and your experience has been on the medical side. What are your thoughts, and is there anything that you're particularly nervous about, or just excited, or both?
Obviously, uh, just by the way I've practiced through the years, I like new challenges and new opportunities. I don't think being a physician, and no one wants to fail, and no one wants to disappoint, and so certainly those are things. It's also not my comfort area. I'm not going to lie, and so one doesn't want to venture into an area that they feel ill qualified. This is not. I didn't train to do this, and so it's daunting. I'm not going to lie, and how to make it happen, like I don't have a clue, and so again, it's there's intrigue in the challenge, and there's also, oh my God, what am I doing? Kind of idea. So again, there's hesitation and reservations, but you know, there is also the underlying belief that something needs to change. And I had, we had thought about how do we get legislation change. Legislation never happens. You know, only time legislation happens is when the public demands that changes be made. And so, how can we change what the public is perceiving? That's the whole rationale on this. Is that's the hope.
That's so perfect. I just want to throw in this quote that I actually did find recently, and you'll love this, Dave. It says, "Art, freedom, and creativity will change society faster than politics," says Victor Pinchuk. What are your thoughts on that?
Sounds like a good Ukrainian.
Mhm.
Sounds like a good Ukrainian there. You know, a distant relative of mine. So obviously, no, absolutely. I think art is much more powerful than what I think most people fully perceive or appreciate. And in medicine, we often talk about evidence-based medicine. That's become the catchphrase, which that has replaced what we used to call the art of medicine. And they should be complementary, but they've often now become almost competitors or polar opposites. There is an art of medicine. Like it or not, we don't know everything. Okay, and so they should be complementary. But art, again, is more powerful, particularly when you're talking about things that are emotion and beliefs, and that's what a lot of death and dying, the reality is there's a lot of emotion in it, and there's a lot of beliefs, be it faith based, be it just on an emotional higher plane type of level.
I think that's a really, really, really good point. That absolutely, I think you summarized that perfectly. And yeah, thank you. That's very interesting. Evidence versus art, and I think there's been so many debates around that in many areas of science that's come up lately. So I think that's something very interesting to keep in mind, that things don't necessarily need to be oppositional, they can be complementary. And I think that applies to a lot of politics and medical issues and science issues. So that's I think really good to keep in mind. That's a good perspective.
And it, yeah, no, it, and again, it might be easier said than done. Um, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but this idea that there's things that we'll never be able to fully prove, you know, and so that's why experience, that's why the stories are so powerful. You know, if you saw a story of something that didn't go well, you don't need to have evidence to say, there was a double blind randomized trial that says that didn't go well. People would go, well, I don't want to experience that. No one else should experience it. We don't need evidence that, that's how a story is powerful. Doesn't mean evidence shouldn't help guide and how we do better. But again, it's often, there seems to be this contrast, which is unfortunate, in that it's preventing us from doing better.
Yeah, thank you. The contrast. And I know that I feel like there's so much to dive into with that alone, and we could spend hours and hours. I know that you've mentioned, obviously, the story has come up a couple times now, and I think that there's a lot to explore on the artistic side of docuseries and what you're sort of jumping into. So if I know Chelsi has a couple of things that we wanted to also inquire about, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, like Rio mentioned, we are going to slightly pivot to the more creative side of the project. And you did just briefly mention like the importance of storytelling and art. So, is that like just from what you mentioned before, like why did you choose artistic collaborators to complete your vision for this project?
I think I recognize what some of my strengths are, but also what some of my weaknesses are. I can tell a story at times. Um, I can't tell it necessarily in a fashion that would reach everyone. I certainly don't know exactly what else needs to be brought in. Like, what are the visuals that would really accentuate a story? And again, the idea of the story is to relate to the mass, a larger audience. Perhaps what I would relate to in a story isn't what everyone would relate to. So bringing in different perspectives and opinions and ideas only makes something stronger. And so the idea of, I can learn, like I've learned a lot, in different things I've done, and there's times that I've learned the hard way, and it's taken longer. So going into a medium that I am not familiar with, it would be arrogant and naive not to have others who are that are more learned and knowledgeable in it guiding and working with me. Collaboration makes everything better.
Yeah, I agree, and I think just even from you explaining that right now, it's a matter of, like you said, going in and asking questions, being curious, and understanding that we don't have all the answers. So being able to collaborate with people for such an important project, I think is like commendable almost. And I also wanted to know, like, you're tackling very important issues with this docu series, but do you think that there has been anything done to address these issues in terms of policy or education or even providing care in Canada?
Um, so there's been other stories that have been told, and so I haven't seen every, and I can't talk about every type of media that has or has not happened. I think what a lot of the stories, unfortunately, always have the happy ending. Always have that, you know, oh, they were really sick, it was really bad, and then they got better. Sometimes other types of stories have been that, in ideas in changing policy, which was you gave me a two-part kind of question there simultaneously, or at least I heard two parts. Policy has changed, and I think probably the biggest example of that I can think of immediately is the physician assisted death. That was obviously outlawed in Canada, and that you know there was it went to the Supreme Court that changed the policy, but there was also a lot of news stories saying how unfortunate, how bad it was for various cases. And so I think a combination of that, as well as the Supreme Court, made it such that the government went, wow, you know, the, the court is telling us we need to do something, but more importantly, our constituents are the people in Canada are asking for change. And so change does happen. I think that's an example in the deaf and dying where change has happened. Um, for me, the number of cases that are like that, I don't do MAID, but the number of cases that do happen with MAID are so few. It that's not the vast majority of situations, and so, but we can learn from it. We can hopefully help others with it. So yes, I do think policies will change, have changed.
Okay, yeah, that's good to hear. I know it's hard to really make a huge difference, especially like you mentioned earlier with just like policy and legislation. So to hear that there has been stuff done in the past that have made a difference is like inspiring, I would say. And I guess we're slightly pivoting a little bit more, but we want to know, like, is there anyone in the arts world that you really admire that you would love to collaborate with?
Um, yes.
And yeah, don't even worry. Like, you don't have to mention like
So
specific names or
no,
anything, but
again, like the way I would put it is, what have I related to in topics and things? Um, I think of Malcolm Gladwell often. Will do a story that's compelling and entertaining at the same time. And that for me is the hope, telling a story, but having a purpose to the story, underlying problem that one is trying to change. Um, Believe it or not, I would want a lot of humor in this. Um, it's almost at times in when you're dealing with death and dying, there is at times humor that comes in, and you don't want humor at anyone's expense, but it's humor for me is that pressure relief valve when you're dealing with such intense emotion, and the idea is, can we laugh at ourselves, um, you know finding humor to you know bring a smile when someone is upset and difficult. So when you ask me about who would, you know, to collaborate. I'm not an expert on that, and it's, you know, my stepson's more into directing and all of these kind of things, and he's like, oh, you look at the cinematography, look at the lighting, and I'm like, oh, I just want to know the story, you know, and but recognizing that all of that's important. If you don't have that, you don't have a good story. So that would be the idea. Like I don't want to, wouldn't want to do something sensationalized, you know, like you know, Michael Moore at times you kind of, you know, brings an issue, but the idea is I really want both sides. I want it to unite everyone as opposed to any type of division with it. He's quite compelling in his stories that he tells. Um, the idea is if we could do something compelling to make a difference, that's the hope. I wouldn't want to alienate or, you know, have any groups feeling they've been mistreated or snubbed by it. And so that's not something that one would hope to do on such a sensitive topic. So the idea is entertaining, enlightening, and a little bit of humor to offset the gravity at times of the situation.
Yeah, and I think that's a really creative approach, to kind of not only like putting out a message, but somehow giving people comfort and allowing them to smile through whatever tribulations we go through in life. So I guess somewhat related to, you mentioning using humor possibly, with this medium. Do you like, what do you think people possibly in the healthcare industry could learn about the approach and values from the art world?
To have emotion, emotion is good. It's like at times when I hear, it's not just myself, but others explain things to families, the use of scientific terms, you know, is hard for families and individuals to relate to. I often think at sometimes that individuals, when they use those words, are doing it to insulate themselves from the emotion that's going on. And you know, it's hard. Like you can't be fully empathic all the time because you would burn out as a health professional. But at times, empathy is so powerful and so necessary. And so, how can individuals in the healthcare system learn to be emotional? Learn to recognize um, that sometimes the most powerful things I think I've said is that I don't have the words. I don't know what to tell you. You know, and it's considered almost taboo to say, oh, if it was me or that, and I, I'm not sure that's entirely correct. You know, when when I've had to talk to and in, you know, I can remember it was a gentleman in his 40s, and I was in my 40s at the time, and he's got his three kids there, and his wife's dying. And I looked at him, you know, and I said, I don't know what to tell you other than, you know, my heart goes out to you. And, you know, I've got three kids and, you know, I don't know, I don't have anything to offer you other than I'm sorry. And, you know, I wish we could make it better. And it's hard when you're in that. And it's almost easier to say, well, I could do this, you know, even though you recognize that it wouldn't make it better. It's we as health professionals need to learn to embrace our limitations and learn to recognize there's emotions, and there's our emotions, there's family emotions, there's emotions of the staff, and rather than suppress it, how can we uh, allow it to happen, and not anyone be hurt by it or consumed by it. And again, so I think the idea of seeing other alternatives, other ways that things could be done better, you know, um, allowing us to be more comfortable to discuss death and dying with families and individuals. I think that's something that we need to learn to do. And again, as I said, people will only want to learn when they recognize they need to. And that's the hope, is to bring enlightenment of the situation and the idea that things could be better and should be better.
Yeah, and that was so beautifully said that you prompted me on another question. It's going to be my second last question for you. But I think while you were speaking about just, people's experiences in the healthcare field, either, not being robotic, but also understanding that they have emotions too, what do you do, or what is your advice um, with people who are, healthcare professionals? How do they find that balance of, speaking to families and not being robotic, but also understanding that this is a very emotional scenario? How do you find balance so you're not burnt out emotionally, but you're also not a robot just delivering information?
I don't have the answer
Mm.
for yet. So, and that's, I wish I did. Um, for me personally, it's how do I find that balance? Um, there is a certain separation at time, you know, by nature one has. It's the ones that always kind of hit home, like, oh, that could be me. That, you know, boy, that could be my brother, you know, that kind of idea. So that is at times being somewhat selective in how one can do it. Um, Not owning what's going on sometimes as well, and that sometimes people die, or not sometimes, but people die. There's nothing you could have done. you know it doesn't mean sympathy is not guilt, is where I'm trying to go. There is to try to keep that. um, the humor sometimes is what is one's defense mechanism, that one has. And I think humans, by their nature of the so-called dark humor and things that is often there, that is a coping mechanism. It may not be the perfect, and I'm not a psychologist, Chelsea, so perhaps I need to be enlightened. Maybe that could even be one of the episodes, is how do we help health professionals? So it's a good point. It's you know and we talk, like, with, like, I'll talk with my colleagues. I'm fortunate my significant other was an ICU nurse, so we've both seen it, we've both lived it, we've both experienced it. um you know like, she'll know, like, if she hears about, not the case, but the you know people say, oh, a young person, and or oh, it's something as such. Like, you get it. Like, it's not hard to feel it. And that's my coping mechanisms. I'm sure others have maybe healthier ones, but again, perhaps that's something we explore.
I mean, I can also hear, even in you sharing that, even the theme of stories, sharing and not holding it in, even is a form of storytelling. Obviously, there's a way to do it without spreading more trauma, but
Yeah.
I'm also really hearing, yeah, there's almost like a levity that can be uh, come from actually being with and sharing a story, whether it be just with one other person. Having gone through a traumatic experience, and the ones that a lot of healthcare professionals, especially in critical care, are facing in their jobs can be traumatic. I think that's amazing that I'm hearing even a thread in there about telling stories, whether in a larger creative sense or even in a smaller, more intimate sense too. And that's like the whole human side of us, actually, not just the scientific side of us that needs evidence and needs facts and that needs protocol and needs rules, but just an expression, perhaps, even. And that's art. Expression, actually, that makes us feel something. It's what makes us human. Um, I think that's so perfect in so many ways that
Yeah.
was brought back to that.
Yeah. And don't forget, we get to tell good stories too, like happy
That's
stories.
right.
Sometimes when people are passing away, it's actually a good story.
Right.
That family were there, they were able to, and so there is good in that, but there's also happy stories. You get to
Perfect.
share the, you know,
That's true.
guess what,
Yeah.
so, it's not, if it was
Not doom and gloom.
all
Yeah.
that would be hard. So you get to share some happy things too. And so I think that's the reality,
Perfect.
with it. And so it's, again, we like telling stories, or at least I like telling stories. It makes for a way of bonding, and I think there's an appreciation, of what's gone on, by telling the story. People, are drawn in, and you know, I think they want to listen. At least they politely listen to my stories. But again, the idea is it allows us to share,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's what makes us who and what we are, like humans. To we tell stories, and that's what binds us and brings
That's
us
right.
together.
That's right. Actually, so on that point, clearly we could go on and on. I can hear how passionate you are on this topic. I am too. We all are. And just the fact that this is being explored and expressed through an artistic project is, no less an awesome endeavor. So, to that point, actually, one of our mantras, cultures at Taboo Health actually is acknowledgement. So, with that, what could you acknowledge yourself in for taking on this creative project?
Sorry, say that again. Can I acknowledge myself? Is that what you said?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you hinted at some of it already. You went out of going out of your comfort zone, and there's a couple of things you said already, actually.
Yeah. Again, to me, it's a new project, a new idea, a new
Yeah,
way to help others and to make a
yeah,
difference. I think we all get into medicine for our own reasons, and you know, I think to find meaning and purpose, perhaps was my underlying reason for taking it on, and I thought this would be a new way to make a difference, and so that was the rationale for doing it. And again, you know, I I built my own basement. I've do my own renovations. I like new challenges, and so this kind of brings everything, a new challenge with the opportunity to make a difference, to make things better. So
beautiful.
win
And
win win.
yes, exactly. And I mean, the hope is really that other people in your shoes that have never maybe dabbled even in a creative project, but might have an idea, might see the possibility, actually get enlivened, excited, and see what's possible in actually collaborating with others who might have those skills and can, make that difference in this new way, and through stories. So, with that, we're gonna wrap this up with some rapid fire questions so that our audience, all of us, can get to know you a little bit outside of this project too. You ready? Yeah.
You betcha.
Okay, perfect, perfect. Here we go. Okay, so if you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why? One sentence.
Ooh, nice.
Um, Dead, let's say Einstein.
All right.
Um, Alive, Ricky Gervais.
Love it. Okay, could you see yourself in any other career and why?
Um, could see myself.
Yes.
Uh, I don't know. home renovations.
Ooh,
Why?
okay, all right.
At
Next
the
up,
end of
Dave's
the
gonna have a YouTube channel of all of his DIY
well, you know
projects,
what?
all the
You say that.
following.
I've actually thought about, like those shows where they have
Those are
people
good
come in
shows where you
and
have like,
do renovations. I thought it'd be like
Yeah.
the doctor who can renovate.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh. See, you've got your whole personal brand up already. People would watch that. I would
you know,
watch that. Definitely.
I've taken all the pictures of things I've done, so
Perfect. See, retirement. You can, you can start to diversify. You're good.
yeah,
You're good. All right. What is the most spontaneous thing you've ever done? Anything that comes to mind?
yeah. I don't know. I'm not a
Okay.
spontaneous
Okay.
guy. So.
I feel
Doing
like you're
this
holding back on
podcast,
that one, but that's okay too. Okay. What would the childhood version of you be most proud of about yourself today? Oh my gosh. I feel like this should be like, could be a paragraph, but a sentence.
what would the child version of me be the most proud of?
Proud of.
I think I'm much more able to communicate with others. I think I was a lot more shy as a child than I am now.
I would not have guessed that.
I'm
Never.
actually an introvert, Maria. So that's
Wow.
it's. There is hope for introverts out there, but it's the ability to communicate and be comfortable with, you know, who and what you are. And so
Lovely.
maybe that's childhood Dave would be most appreciative of.
Oh, that's beautiful. All right. And if there was another city, location in the world where you'd want to be and live, maybe, where would that be?
No, I'm pretty happy with Canada. Pretty
Yeah.
happy with Ottawa.
Canada is.
I mean, I wouldn't mind going to other places in Canada, but you know, there's no other country I'd want to live in. So I would say I'm
Beautiful.
good. I'm good.
Yes. Yes. Canadian pride right there.
Yeah.
And Ottawa
Doesn't mean I
pride.
don't want to visit where it's warm. You know,
Right. Yeah, of
the,
course.
the
Of
snow in
course. We all need to
April.
get away in the winter
Yeah,
from time to time. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for taking this time with us today. I know I've met you outside of this project, and so thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure always getting to know you and even more on this project with you, and just having you come on and meet the rest of our team at Taboo as well. So, how can people find out about your project or hear about the next progress or next
that's a
steps?
good question. We should probably have a website or something to
Oh,
help do it.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
certainly, I think be an opportunity on your
Hmm.
website there, Maria,
That's a good
and
point. Yeah,
to
that's
help
right.
connect and help bring
Well,
that
so
together. You know,
next steps already. That's
there
right.
you go. So
And
no, obviously, you know, there's not too many Neilipovitzes in the world. So Google Dave Neilipovitz, you're gonna find me. But
perfect.
yeah, no, I think whatever kind of connection, looking to collaborate and you know
Yes,
how
exactly.
can I help you on your projects would be the way it's you know
Perfect.
way I would
So,
look
for
at it.
all the listeners and viewers out there, we're looking for people to join Dave's project. This could be, I heard earlier today, an artistic director for this film, even a script writer. It is a docu-series. Obviously, Dave will get us in on all the amazing places to be with patients, to be with other care providers who will be part of this docu-series as well. Other people who are interested in this topic, in this issue, producers, other foundations or colleges in this space, I'm sure, who care about this and raising these questions for a better death and dying process in Canada. This is for all of us. So please do reach out to us. You can contact Taboo Health in the meanwhile at admin@taboohealth.org. And I can certainly put you all in touch with Dave. So thank you so much, Chelsi and Rio, for helping to host this and asking all of our questions to our passionate guest today, Dave. Angela is on the back end, actually, on production. So thank you, Angela. She's not on camera, but she's there as well. And just thank you to everybody for listening and joining. Stay posted. We'll keep you posted as well on where this docuseries goes and where you can find out about Dave next. He will be actually, speaking of, speaking and presenting at the Dying Dot series symposium, which has been relocated now. It was in February, but we had to reschedule that because of COVID, and that will be now in September 16th. So check out dyingseries.ca for that website, and there will be more information posted as we get closer.
Thank you so
all right.
much.
Thank you all, everyone. Have a lovely, it's an evening here in Toronto and Ottawa here today. So thank you all again.
Thanks for having me. Nice meeting you, ladies.
Thanks,
All the best.
You too. Thank you.
Amazing.